This is Nigeria, the most populous country in Africa, with a population of about 201 million people. Nigeria has 36 states with more than 250 ethnic groups and about 500 different languages. There is a multiplicity of cultures, in Nigeria. Nigeria's lingua franca is English, but 3 major ethnic groups exist in Nigeria, and these groups are Hausa, Yoruba, and Igbo. I was born in Nigeria, but not into one of the major ethnic groups. Nigeria, through Nollywood, has a thriving music and cinema industry. I was born in Edo State, one of the smallest of Nigeria's ethnic groups. Our regional language is Esan. I received all my education through the undergraduate level in Nigeria. This is the United States of America, a country with 50 states. The United States of America has a population of approximately 330 million people. The United States has the world's largest economy. I have lived here for about 10 years. I earned my master's and doctoral degrees here. I have been privileged to work in preschool education for as long as I have been here. As a Nigerian by birth and an American citizen by naturalization, I have a unique perspective that allows me to compare learning situations in both countries. These are some of the things that have worked in Nigeria but would never fly in the United States. Group prayers at both public and private schools. Okay, through my elementary and high school education, prayer was compulsory. We prayed once in the morning during assembly time and sometimes once at the end of the day before students were dismissed for home. I grew up in a predominantly Christian part of Nigeria, so I cannot say for certain if prayers were compulsory in other regions. During prayer sessions, the Bible was read and preached either by an assigned teacher or student. There were prescribed hymn books from which songs were sung daily. Christian celebrations like Christmas and Easter were celebrated. Main themes dealing with the birth and death of Jesus Christ were part of the Christian religious syllabus. Reenactments of Christian stories were commonplace within different classrooms. It was okay to organize and participate in Christian praise and worship. I learned very quickly to recognize that in the United States, it is necessary to avoid including prayer or religious content in my classroom activities. Understandably, because in addition to the Supreme Court's June 25, 1962 declaration that school-sponsored prayer was unconstitutional in the groundbreaking case of Engo versus Vitali, it is also particularly important to understand that the American society is made up of a multiplicity of religious beliefs, cultures, and people. Please leave a comment below. What are your thoughts on prayer in school? Do you think it should stay just the way it is, where you can't have prayer in school? Leave your thoughts below. Daily assembly. I remember having daily assemblies from elementary through high school. When it rained, General Assembly was cancelled, but individual classrooms were mandated to do an assembly. A General Assembly was a gathering of all students and staff at a designated part of the school building. There was a bell ringer and timekeeper elected as part of the student leadership team. Their goal was to make sure assembly started at the appointed time, as well as make sure the bell was loud enough for everyone in the school to be alerted that it was time to line up. During assembly, each classroom had an assigned standing area. Everyone was lined up. Administrators were usually in front of the gathering, while teachers and other staff were behind, making sure there was order and silence. During an assembly, which usually lasted about an hour, The Nigerian national anthem was sung, the pledge was recited, and prayers were said. Then there were announcements. One other thing I remember about the assembly was that students were publicly rewarded or punished depending on behavior. Punishment was either by corporal punishment or yoga poses. Believe me, none was pleasant. Now that I look back, I can remember that occasionally students fainted at the assembly, probably due to the heat or exhaustion from standing too long. Assemblies were not our favorite parts of the day. They were mandatory, long, and monotonous. Students would hide in the most unlikely places, like under stairs, to avoid assemblies. The assembly concept will never fly in the United States. With prayer and discipline, there are legal barriers to implementation. That is not true of an assembly, but it's a practice that has never been adopted here. Schools have occasional assemblies like pep rallies. This has just never been done on a daily mandatory basis. Some of the Nigerian staples, such as singing the national anthem and public shaming or reward for behavior, are becoming less and less emphasized in American education. Also, the health implications make the assembly concept less likely in the American society. The closest thing to an assembly an American has probably experienced will be a military formation. My Nigerian family, if you experienced assembly, was it something you enjoyed? My American families, what would you think would happen if American schools were to implement the assembly system? Labor. Yes, we had labor. I'm not referring to having a baby kind of labor, although it felt like it sometimes. I'm referring to labor as in doing the job of a lawnmower manually with a cutlass. Cutlasses were sometimes provided by the school, but at other times, students were required to bring a cutlass as part of their school supplies. There was a labor prefect, usually a male, and an assistant labor prefect, usually a female. The role of a labor prefect was to assign individual portions of grass to students and also to inspect that they were well cut. And afterwards, the labor prefects would dismiss. The prefects had staff overseers who were always available to discipline students who did not think the prefects were authority enough. Labor was exhausting, sometimes under very humid conditions, and I guess because it was something we were compelled to do, never enjoyable. Labor was also used as a form of punishment. Sometimes, depending on the gravity of a student's behavior, grass portions were assigned and deadlines given. For instance, you could have labor for a week instead of recess if you were caught fighting. Although labor kept the school environment looking clean and well maintained and students looking fit and healthy, the concept of labor would never fly in the United States. So, this is the thing about the United States. There are child labor laws that are geared towards the employment and well-being of children. For instance, the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938 safeguards educational opportunities for children by prohibiting their employment in jobs that are harmful to their health and safety, limiting hours of employment, as well as ensuring that youths are adequately compensated for the job they do. Where labor laws stop, human rights advocates start. No wonder the concept of labor will never fly in the United States educational system. How ethical would you say is labor? If it's called labor, which sounds like a form of employment to me, why aren't students paid for it? Please leave your comments below. You know I always love to hear it. Use of corporal punishment. Generally, African students are very respectful to their teachers. However, when an African student steps out of line, he or she can expect to be punished physically. This is what happened to me at my elementary and high school. Corporal punishment is utilized regularly in African schools. Group punishment for an entire class is commonplace, especially when the culprit is not identified by the class. I remember vividly our school's disciplinarian. He was called Pa Kingsley. Not because he was an older man, but because he was an expert at inflicting maximum pain by flogging. He was never caught without 1 or 2 bamboo canes on him. The mere mention of his name was enough to bring many wayward children back to compliance. We were so terrified of being flogged sometimes that we learned to cast a spell on the punisher. I did not think the spell made any sense or worked, but I learned to pick an eyelash, wrap it in paper, and make sure the person who was supposed to discipline me stepped on it. I even tried that spell on my parents. It did not work because it seemed like I was punished even harder. Here in America, the idea of a Parkinsley figure patrolling the halls of a school with a bamboo cane at the ready is inconceivable. It's outrageous and it's criminal. Tell me, family, what are your thoughts about corporal punishments generally? Do you think there are situations it is necessary, or it should be completely scrapped from all educational systems? Uniforms and grooming. These are some of the headlines about grooming and uniforms that has made the national news in the United States lately. Nigerian schools have strict uniform policies. Sometimes the policies are enforced by teachers taking matters into their own hands without parental consent. For instance, I remember the many times teachers cut students' hair and nails because they were non-compliant with school policies. If a female student had on a uniform that was too short, she would be instructed to change into something 2 sizes larger and longer. Parents, in my experience, always supported the school in whatever decision they made regarding the child. Another thing that is rare in the United States. Now, there you have it. Nigerian versus American education. What I experienced across 2 cultures. 5 Nigerian practices that will never fly in the United States.